It is low cricket. The board meeting will now come to order at 5 o'clock p.m. Good evening and thank you for attending the Albuquerque Civilian Police Oversight Advisory Board meeting today, December 11th, 2025. Ms. Barilla, can I get a roll call vote, please?
Xander Bullionitz.
Present.
Eduardo Budenaro.
Present.
Aaron Calderon.
Present.
Member Roan Weimark.
Present.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Ms. Barilla.
Yes.
The next order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. All rise.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. The next order of business is the approval of the agenda. Do any board members have any proposed changes to the agenda? No? All right. Then I make a motion that the agenda be approved as written. Can I get a second?
I second that motion.
Thank you, Vice Chair Calderon. Ms. Barilla, can I get a roll call vote, please?
Chair Bullionitz.
Approved.
Member Budenaro.
Approved.
Vice Chair Calderon.
Approved.
Member Weimark.
Approved.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That motion passed unanimously.
Thank you, Ms. Barilla. The next order of business is the review and approval of minutes. Do any board members have any changes? Oh, of course, it was on the wrong piece of paper. From the previous board meeting in October? All right, Ms. Barilla, I make a motion that the minutes be approved as written. Can I get a second?
Second.
Thank you, Member Weimark. Ms. Barilla, can I get a roll call vote, please?
Yes, and just for clarification, that's the November 13, 2025 board minutes.
Yes.
Thank you. Chair Bullionitz.
Approved.
Member Budenaro.
Approved.
Vice Chair Calderon.
Approved.
Member Weimark.
Approved.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That motion passed unanimously.
Thank you, Ms. Barilla. The next order of business is the reports from the City Department. First up is APD, and the first one up is gracing us with his presence today, Chief Harold Medina.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the Oversight Board, and thank you for having me here this afternoon. Pardon me for my civilian attire. I was in a deposition today, so it wasn't in my uniform, but I just going to give a little bit of an update on the Albuquerque Police Department and where we're at. And I want to reflect back about a year. The Albuquerque Journal wrote an editorial that 2023 was probably the best year that the Albuquerque Police Department had in a long time. And I look back at that writing recently and I recognize that everything in 2024 has outdone 2023. And I'm going to start with probably the biggest accomplishment of 2025 that we had. And I mixed those 2 years up, 23. 24 is better, 25 is better than 24. Losing track of my years there. You know, in 2025, in right around May, we were able to get out of our consent decree that we had been under for a decade. We were given full and effective compliance ratings from the Department of Justice and the monitoring team, and Judge Browning dismissed the case against the Albuquerque Police Department and the City of Albuquerque. That was a big milestone for us as a department. It was the #1 thing that Mayor Keller tasked me with, along with crime, when I became Chief of Police in 2020. And I'm here and glad to report that the hard work of a lot of individuals, whether it's city legal, the CPOA, had roles, a lot of roles that were fulfilled in order for us to be able to get out of that consent decree. And it's just a show of what dedication, teamwork, and our ability to work together and accomplish a goal by problem solving through it. Like I said, there's a lot of thank yous that are beyond this room. There's a lot of ground level people that we can't forget, plus long leadership that did key things. Deputy Chief Corey Lowe cannot be forgotten for everything she did before her retirement, and she deserves some credit for everything that she did to move the department into the direction of going to full compliance, and all the way through, you know, Deputy Chief Griego, who'll be retiring at the end of the month. If you get a chance, shoot JJ an email just thanking him for his 30 years of service and everything that he's done to help the department move forward in terms of compliance. You know, the next big thing is crime statistics. Many times I'm asked, how do you know what the morale is in the police department? And any good leader knows that their job is to inspire, motivate, and get their people to do extraordinary things and to work hard. You know, I'm not a big New England Patriot fan, but Tom Brady was really good at inspiring and motivating ordinary athletes to perform at an extraordinary level. And our officers in 2024 had a record number of arrests, and in 2025 they're breaking that record again. So our productivity as a police department is way up. And we see it as a reflection in our crime statistics. And I know that there'll always be questions. People talk about unreported crime. Two of the biggest crime categories that I look at to get a good sense of is crime going down are homicides, because bodies typically can't vanish, and auto theft. Everybody wants their car back, and they have to be reported. Happy to report that homicide is down about 32 to 34% for the year. We are crossing our fingers that we finish in the 60s, which hasn't been done in almost a decade. I think it's 8 years since we've been that low. Auto theft is down 43%, 42 to 44%, somewhere in there this year. I want to kind of break that down a little bit and look back to when this administration came back. In 2017, I returned to the Albuquerque Police Department as deputy chief, and Mayor Keller asked me to look at auto theft because it was the number one issue we're facing. There's approximately over 10,000 auto thefts in the metro area at that time with the police department. This year, we're going to come out right around 42 to 4,400 auto thefts. So clearly 6,000 less cars stolen in our city, 6,000 less victims. So not only that, we continue to see all other crime categories, every major category that we track: shoplifting, auto burglary, auto theft, commercial burglary, residential burglary are all down double digits, as so is some of our violent crime, aggravated assaults, and sexual offenses. So when you look at the productivity and you see that we have record numbers of arrests, record lows, you know, I'm comfortable in saying that our officers feel supported, comfortable in the environment that they're at, and that they continue to be highly motivated and out accomplishing great tasks. But there's also a reason that we've been able to improve as a department in those areas. We developed years ago a program called Duke City Stat, where each week deputy chiefs hold their commanders accountable to the current trends of crime. And we went from being very reactive to this is where we see the crime, to the crime was occurring there, what did you do about it? And we want to know more now instead of what are you going to do, what have you been doing about the crime that you're seeing? And it's been extremely successful. Deputy Chief Barker and Deputy Chief Vega oversee that board, that Duke City Stat meeting, and they should be commended for how they've broken the silos of the Albuquerque Police Department. In 2019-ish, I asked an area commander at the time as a deputy chief, when was the last time homicide had briefed him about the homicide in his area command, and he said never. I then looked at the violent crimes commander and said, how many homicides are there year to date? And he didn't know. And I will tell you right now, those are numbers that are ingrained in everybody's mind. I think we're about right around 63 right now in terms of homicides. We've learned to keep score, and we've learned that if we keep score, you're able to hold people accountable and you're able to track what is occurring. You know, we talked a little bit about the success with DOJ. We talked a little bit about the success with fighting crime. The next area I'd like to address is just talking about recruiting, retention, and how are we going to continue to move forward as a police department. It's no secret, we've always struggled with our personnel numbers. When I returned in 2017, we were in the low 800s. I'm happy to report that we have right around 925 officers at this point in time, with about another 30 in training. That takes us to 955. And when you think that we're getting ready to start another academy class of hopefully 30, that takes us to 985. We're 15 positions away from being fully staffed. Not only that, we only had about 35 PSAs when I came back in 2017, and many times of the year we're well over 100 PSAs on the department, and I think now we're currently at about 93? 96, I'm off 3. I have all these numbers in my head. So I think it's important that we continue to move forward, and we recognize these extra PSAs 2 years after starting is big bulk of the officers that we're seeing joining the department. I want to compliment City Council. I want to compliment the administration, mayor, everybody. They have done a fabulous job of working together to ensure that our officers are compensated well. Specifically, some specific examples is Councilor Clarissa Pena. She helped bring the idea to me of community policing pay, where we give officers an incentive to stay within the same area command every year. This next pay period before Christmas, officers who have been in the same area command 4 years will get a $5,200 incentive. Those that have been there 1 year will get $1,300, and you can see that $1,300 gradually goes up to the $52. And it's helped us keep officers in the same area command, which is our ultimate goal for strong community policing, and it's worked really well for us. I think that also talking about some of the big successes we've had with the Assistant to City Council is Councilor Bazan was just miraculous in helping us develop and ensure that we had training for our detectives. That training is paying off for us now. When I took over as chief, we had about a 55% clearance rate on homicides. This year, we've cleared more homicides than we've had. We haven't cleared every homicide from this year, but we're starting to really dip into and clearing the backlog of homicides from those years where we had 55% and lower. So one particular case from 2014, I had the privilege of sitting as the families were notified that those cases were going to be closed because we had solved those cases with some of the resources we brought in to work on those older resources. So we continue to see not only the number of cases going up, the productivity going up, we also see the quality in the fact that we're being able to solve more cases and get more cases adjudicated in the favor of justice. You know, I want to move a little bit into some of the biggest issues we have right now. Our biggest issue that we're faced with from the community is the unhoused community. And, you know, I want to say here that I really commend some of our officers and the empathy and the heart that they show. I know one particular officer who didn't want to do media about it, but he actually took a homeless individual for a haircut to try to help this person stabilize and get them on their feet. Another officer who I was told dropped food off at a hotel because an individual had been able to get a room there. It's a difficult balance, and I know everybody would lean and say that we should just enforce the law at times, nonstop, zero tolerance. But our officers have a balance. There's time that they develop relationships, and they do. They issue a lot of citations, make a lot of arrests. We talked about those record numbers, but I think it's important that we don't play the blame game here. The Albuquerque Police Department is doing everything they can. The jail is at capacity. There's no way we could arrest 1,000 people and put them into the jail. They'd have to release 900 to stay within the confines of McClendon and the case capacity at the jail. The DA's office only has so many prosecutors. We'd love for them to prosecute our misdemeanor cases. We're working with them. They would need about a $6 million upgrade from the state legislature in order to hire the attorneys for them to take over prosecution. They recently started working on incompetency cases. There's no beds. We're learning that there is no beds for us to take these people who are incompetent, that have competency issues. So I think it's important that as a community, we continue to voice and we continue to work through the Metro Crime Initiative that was developed by the mayor's office in 2019. And we work with our state legislature to ensure that our voice is heard as a community, and they recognize that they have to build more places to take individuals going through mental health crisis. That's specific to that. It's sad that Metro Detention Center is the biggest mental health building facility in the Bernalillo County. We need places where people with substance abuse can go get help. I am honest. I have members of my family who struggle with substance abuse problems, and if the chief of police himself can't help a family member get to those resources, what hope does everyday mom and dads have who are struggling with their kids? So I hope that, you know, maybe this board would consider a letter to our state legislature saying that, you know, we do have to get the facilities and the resources to the criminal justice system. Let's not blame the judges. The judges, they only have so many beds to send people to. The judges they have limitations on when they could detain, when they can't. We need to support all our systems, and I'm not saying give APD a lot of money. I'm saying let's invest in the proper resources that's gonna stop this hamster wheel that we're stuck on. I also think it's important that we talk about, you know, some ongoing issues that we've had. It's no secret we are still in the midst of a DWI corruption scandal. Rebuilding public trust was of the utmost importance to me. Thanks to the technology, and we'll talk about technology after this, upgrades, we have been able to establish public-facing dashboards that show dismissal rates so the public could look and see what's occurring with our DWI officers, why cases are being dismissed, are put on there was the FTA, was evidentiary problems, and we're tracking it much better. We're doing a very good job in increasing our prosecution rates on those cases, and we continue to monitor and current cases, and we continue to work with our federal prosecutors and anything they need to forward those DWI cases so that they're working on in this corruption scandal. So in whole, I think it's important that we continue to recognize that, yes, we know there was a problem dating back to 1995, almost 30 years. We've taken it serious from the beginning. We worked through strong relationships with our federal partners. And just to note that, there was one agency that had an agency head at the table with them and communicating with them during the course of this investigation. I felt bad for some of our other law enforcement leaders because they were really taken by surprise when their agencies were identified, but we worked with the feds from the very beginning, and we'll continue to ensure that we seek justice for all those victims who were injured in DWI crashes that got no justice. So, the last piece I want to talk about is technology and the advancements we've had. And, when I became chief, I thought back in my career, and I was a lieutenant 14 years on before I got to sit down with the chief of police and talk. And I wanted to do things differently for the Albuquerque Police Department, and I started to host a chief's breakfast every month, first Friday of the month generally. 20 randomly chosen employees are invited to the chief's office. We sit down, and the first round around the table, I asked them to introduce themselves. I asked them to tell me about their families and their hobbies. And the second time, I asked them to talk about what is one good thing the department's doing and what's one place where we have an opportunity to improve. And I will tell you, in 2020, at the height of discipline with the DOJ, officers were not shy. They came in and they gave their opinion about how miserable they felt their working conditions were. And they talked about how they did not like the use of force policy, and it took so long, and they sat there while investigations were conducted. And I'm happy to report now, all these years later, I don't even recognize the room. This past Friday, we had a chief's breakfast, and the number one compliment officers had was the technology that we've brought to the department and how this generation, they're different than mine. I struggle with my cell phone at times, and I got to call Mike, something's wrong with my phone. This generation has really embraced technology. It's important to them, whether it's the license plate readers, the drones. We are only the third agency in the United States who got an out-of-line-of-sight authorization last year from the FAA for drone operations. We have 9 hives in the city. We're still looking for funding to fully outfit each hive with a maximum number of drones. And we could basically have a drone over a crime scene live streaming to officers for their safety, gathering recorded evidence for prosecution within 90 seconds. So the drones have probably been the biggest technology upgrade we've had of 2025. And there's been so many successes, whether it's drones or license plate readers. We now have license plate readers on every single marked unit. And the first week we had them, those license plate readers solved a homicide. Because an officer driving to a homicide scene picked up a license plate of a white Ford pickup truck that later turned out to be the offender, and they were able to tie that license plate to the scene, track that offender down, and make an arrest on the homicide case. So technology has helped us greatly, along with recognizing the importance and giving a chance to some of our, what we call now professional staff, our civilians. They have been a game changer for us. They take tasks that officers viewed as administratively that we didn't need, and quite frankly, me and Mayor have categorized it. A badge and a gun now goes to a badge and a gun call, and we have civilians helping us do research data, research social media, build cases. Not only that, we have ACS who responds to these cases and have reduced our use of force because they're a better tool. The uniform itself sometimes escalates individuals in crisis. ACS is able to go in there in a much softer fashion. And let's not forget, the first year of their existence, we saw almost a 50% decrease in the use of force in some of the situations that officers were involved in the past. I'm not proud to say it, but the biggest example I always use is a 22, 23-year-old officer. I was dispatched to a mother with her 9-year-old that she couldn't get to go to school and control. I had no relationship long-term, I had no kids, and I had no business trying to tell somebody how to raise their kids. I ruined the kid probably to this day because I went in there with the big, tough cop personality that you're going to go to school because I said. We now send the right tool to the situation with the advent of ACS, and I hope that this group can always advocate during budgeting season to ensure that ACS gets what they need, because it is truly like adding another officer to the streets because they're able to take calls that we would be handling off of our plate. I just want to finish by thanking everybody here. You have a wonderful director. We meet on a monthly basis, and I don't think that's something that always happened. We communicate, we work through, we have tough discussions. We sometimes have to find ways to problem solve where we're at, but we always come to a resolution. There's always an open line of communication, and you're very fortunate to have such a great personality here that is able to work and communicate with the police department. Because like I said, I don't think there's a director before who was able to go sit down with the Albuquerque Police Department on a monthly basis and work through and communicate some of the problems that we're all facing, because we're all trying to do the same thing: hold officers accountable, make sure they're treated fairly, and ensure that the public has trust in the Albuquerque Police Department. Yesterday it kind of came out at some point in time, chiefs have been here 30 years. Yes, in the future I'm going to retire, but then I hope to see everybody in a future meeting. But when I do leave, I leave with my head held high with where the Albuquerque Police Department is and the relationships we have that used to be adversarial with agencies like the Civilian Police Oversight Agency and the police department, that are now much more in tune with each other and able to resolve some of the issues that I talked about earlier. And with that, I'll stand for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Medina. I greatly appreciate that. Board members, do you have any questions for Chief Medina?
I do.
Please.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Chief, for being here. One quick question. So I know the cost is done with. What is our plan or your plan to help ensure that we still maintain a high compliance of all the recommendations they gave, all the things we've learned from them? How do you foresee us maintaining that status quo?
I think the first step is ensuring that we live to the spirit of the policies that we developed during the process. And yes, we are trying to streamline processes like duplicate filling out of reports, taking a report that we filled up independently and making sure it's integrated into our system so it's filled out once, being able to accept statements from witnesses. There's a lot of different changes that we're making to streamline processes, but we're going to stick to the spirit of what was created during the CASA. I think that's important. About 18 months before the consent decree was set, we were on pace to get out. I talked to Mayor, and Mayor was extremely supportive, and Lawrence Royale was the CAO at the time. And we wanted to create an internal method of monitoring in 3 key areas. And we hired a guy from Las Vegas Metro who was a use of force expert, Chris Darcy. We have him on contract, and I hope that he's always on contract for the city, and he's able to review use of force cases that have already been reviewed to ensure the quality of the case and that we'll continue to follow the spirit of the CASA. We have 2 former judges that work with us, Judge Walton and Judge Valdez. One helps us ensure that we continue to develop strong policies, we continue to make sure they're constitutionally supported, and that we continue to move forward in the policy training area. And Judge Valdez reviews other disciplinary cases outside of use of force to make sure that the consistency is there and that every officer is treated fairly. That's one of the things that I think is key to getting officers to accept that discipline and understand it, is when we really went from big numbers of people reviewing cases with different outcomes and officers felt they weren't all getting the fair shake to a limited number of people, it was key for them feeling fair. And that was actually one of the goals of the CASA, to make sure it's fair, consistent discipline on everybody. So those are 3 of the biggest ways that we continue to ensure that the spirit of the settlement agreement lives on and that we don't find ourselves. But, there's one program, I look back, I was here in 2014 when this all unfolded. I retired. I still remember I was the Southwest Area Commander when the riot broke out downtown, and going in to support my area command, taking calls with Deputy Commander Commander who just retired from Internal Affairs. Me and him took the calls. He was a sergeant, I was the commander, and I look how we went so at odds with the community. And when in 2018 and 19, I started developing a program called the Ambassador Program with the intent of, very simple slogan, they are the ears for the community never heard. And their biggest value came in actually during the course of the homicide investigations on the homicides on the Muslim community a few years back. You know, the beauty of that is the strength of our partnerships showed that Saturday morning at 6 o'clock. Commander Vega called me, he was the commander at the time, and said, Chief, we just picked up a fourth body from the Muslim community, and we're pretty sure it's possibly a serial murderer. The beauty was at 6:05, back then the U.S. attorney answered his phone call from the chief. We had a conversation of what was going on, and he committed to resources. At 6:10, the SAC from the FBI, Raul Brahanda, picked up his phone call from the chief in the morning and said, I will have a command post set up for you by this afternoon. We're going to do this together. By 6:20, Raul Torres was the DA. He picked up his phone call and devoted the resources we needed. By 9 o'clock that morning, because of the ambassador program and our relationships with the Muslim community, we had police cars at all the facilities they asked us to so that we could help the community feel safe. At that time, during the course of the investigation, we came to an 11th hour, and we were going to have to release the individuals unless we had NIBIN results on the shell casings back. ATF had taken a mobile van to the scene. We fired for the first time, we fired test shots on scene and sent those to Huntsville, Alabama. And it was 7 o'clock in the morning in Huntsville. Somebody was there, accepted the shell casing, and before we had to release him, I got a phone call from ATF that said, you got a match on the firearms to the homicides. So I think that's a good example of how technology helped us succeed, how strong partnerships helped us succeed, and how hard work and the community's help, the leads came in from a Crime Stoppers top that we released to the community. So that's a really good example of how all the pieces of the puzzle came together for us, and we're able to give a sense of safety and justice to a certain segment of the community.
I appreciate that answer. I'm glad you touched on the policies, the technology aspect to help make the nuance of paperwork and all that stuff work together and hopefully merge within the system, right? And those partnerships, it's not just an APD job, right? It is that ACS, it is that mixture of FBI, the DA's office, all those different things that help you guys be successful, right? And you guys make them successful as well. So that partnership is a big thing. I love to hear that. My next question was on your stats, right? So you guys have the Duke City stat that you do with your commanders. Is there any future idea, plan to make more data public? I know we have the crime data that you can look up on the website, right? But it's very cumbersome unless you're tech savvy, to your point earlier. If you're tech savvy, it's easier to manipulate. I play with data all day, so does he. And so I love messing with it. But also like just quicker, easier ones, because the biggest issue I know you get at press conferences and stuff is transparency and people not aware and things like that. So I think dashboards for public that you guys do maintain for overall crime for area commands and stuff like that would be good. What specifically? I don't have any ideas. I know we track tons of data within our guys' systems, but I think more dashboards would be helpful. So if there's a future goal to hopefully evaluate, that would be awesome.
Oh, look, we have literally hundreds of dashboards. We do have a homicide dashboard that's public facing, updated basically almost once a week. I have a sheet of paper that covers all the main crime categories. I call it the chief snapshot that's delivered to me once a week. I know we post that monthly as a plain sheet. If you find the chief snapshot, there is no cleaner, easier document to read that gives you overall statistics for the city of Albuquerque. But I love your idea of finding a way of maybe creating a web page for each area command that has specific dashboards specific to that area command. That is a great idea, and I will take that back and we'll see if we can develop something in the future to show that transparency from the area command level to the community.
Yeah, and once you guys create it, please share it with us, because then we can also share it out, right? So like our CPCs can share it during their meetings, and then also like our social media pages, stuff like that, right? Because the more the community is aware, the more they feel that they're involved, and that's the best way we can go about it. So
Okay, that
you, sir.
sounds like a great plan. That's a great idea. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Those are my questions.
Thanks, Vice Chair. And then, Chief Medina, I had a few more questions here, just my apologies. And the first I did want to kind of touch on to Vice Chair Calderon's point was the Duke City stats. I love more data, and I love the fact we're breaking down silos, because I think that's the only way we can improve and go forward is breaking down those silos. And then another stat that you kind of brought up was that we were clearing more homicides than actually homicides this year. And one of the things that kind of brought up that I thought about was, is that in part due to the support you've got for additional resources from the National Guard? And if so, what's that vision and what's your vision and what does success look like for APD in 2026?
I'm gonna break that into two questions. The first question, the clearance rate is a combination of different successes that we had and changes we made at the police department. My first week as chief, or within the first few weeks, I had to go sit down with the New Mexico Crusaders. These are mothers and fathers who have lost loved ones, children, especially to gun violence. And I had to hear the horror stories of how they were treated by the police department and how they felt they've got no sense of justice. We had a 55% clearance rate. Half the room hadn't had justice, so to speak, on their homicide cases. So I took that to heart, and before I left the meeting, Mayor was gracious to approve the hiring of a victims advocate, Terry Hortes. And we now have strong communication with families from day one of a violent crime to ensure that they're updated and get information on resources and case development. The second part of it was Councilor Bazan helped us develop the Detective Academy. It's hard to think. When I went to Laguna as chief when I retired, you know, I learned that my detectives in Laguna went to a 6-week school in Glencoe, Georgia, detective school. And I was like, wow, what a great idea. Our detectives go to the unit and they kind of get on-the-job training. So we always had talked about career development and having courses spread out. And I went to Deputy Chief Barker, who was my chief of staff, and I said, Cecily, this hasn't worked for 20 years. I want you to make me a 2-week course, which is now extended to 3 weeks. And now every detective and a lot of field officers go through a 3-week detective course where they learn report writing, evidence gathering, how to use our technology. That has also been a big game changer. Our digital forensics team, DIT, we stole the whole team from Raul. He had the best team I've ever seen. So I went and I poached Kyle because Kyle knew what the DA's office wanted. And I'm telling you, there are people at APD who weren't happy I brought an outsider in to be the second in command of violent crimes. But I knew he knew what the cases needed for the DAs to prosecute. And he knew technology. And he eventually brought his team over. And those professional staff have made it so much easier for officers so they don't have to worry about electronics, warrants, phone dumps, everything. They do it for the officers. That's also been a big success. Another big success is I took over as chief. We had 6 homicide detectives, and we were in the peak of homicides during just coming out of the COVID. We doubled the size of we more than doubled it. We went from 6 to 12 to 14. And those detectives are helping get those cases solved. The technology is a big piece of it. But the concept behind the National Guard was a little bit different. And if you all have time, on Sunday, I urge you to watch ABC News. ABC National News was here this week because they wanted to showcase how they feel the National Guard could be successfully launched into a community as opposed to how it's been launched in other cities across this country. You know, there's a lot of discussion and thought in the National Guard, but the overall concept was along what we've always said. Have badges and guns do badge and gun works and find others to help them. I'm going to take a SWAT call out for an example. During a SWAT call out, you have an inner perimeter where the SWAT team surrounds the house to get the individual out of the house. You have an outer perimeter that you can't let citizens get into, and sometimes those outer perimeters could need up to 6 to 8 officers to block the street while the SWAT team deals with the situation. Those are officers that you take out of service for up to 14 hours. So the first thing we wanted to do was have National Guard replace those officers so they could go back. And in the first weeks of that operation, we went from an average, and when I took over as chief, we averaged 100 new charge felony arrests a week. We got it up to 125, we got it up to 150 in the preceding years. The first weeks of the National Guard, we were getting it up almost to 200. And our misdemeanor arrests had gone up by like 33%, because it just put our process of getting badges and guns to do badge and gun works, it just put it on steroids. The National Guard was always a 6-month operation. I foresee that it's going to come winding up. I had always predicted it end towards the end of the year. We'll know in the near future here. But our concept was get us through those summer months, because if you look at the year before, we had the same homicide reductions through June, July, and then the world just fell apart on us in August, September, and I could see the arrests were down those months. Our people were guarding scenes. So the National Guard did what they had to do. We expanded them. We got them to watch camera footage at the Real-Time Crime Center. They led us to over 20 felony arrests that they were watching being committed. They saved lives. They saw people go down and they dispatched medics. There was a lot of success from the National Guard in a variety of ways. We had a backlog of cases that were being prepared for the DA's office. They helped us catch up with that backlog. It's been so successful that there are countless other cities in my role as president of Major City Chiefs that have requested all the paperwork that how we deployed National Guard. I've given presentations to the chiefs about it because we truly feel that should be a national model, how you could use that resource properly in a civilian role out in the community. You know, a lot of people pushed back on me and they wanted them out in uniforms and military vehicles. And I stood fast and said no. Mayor supported that. Mayor knew it was also the wrong thing. And together we were able to compromise and come to where they were the polos and they fit more in the community. So the National Guard was always, the original intent was 6 months. I would suppose they're going to be wrapping up at some point in time. But I think people confuse success with just number results. And we have those number results. But if you go down Central, Central still looks rough. Did it really make the difference? And I think that's where it goes back to the earlier conversation. National Guard helped us prove that we could arrest and arrest and arrest, and it's not going to clean up until we get to the root cause of the problem, which is mental health and substance abuse.
Great, I appreciate it. Those were all my questions. Board members, last call for questions. Chief Medina, I really appreciate you.
I didn't have a question so much
Yes, sir.
as just an observation and a comment. Well, one quick question. The relationship between Bernalillo County and the MDC in particular, during ride-alongs, I happened to experience some backlog and taking officers out of service because you had to wait, simply had to wait outside. How is the synergy and with MDC and Bernalillo County Sheriff's Department, in your opinion?
You know, right now we have the best relationship we've had with Bernalillo County. When I was deputy chief in the height of the protest season in 2020, I couldn't make a phone call and say, Sheriff, can you please send me resources? I was required to go do an online request, and I hope somebody got the request, and like it just wasn't feasible. We relied on state police heavily, but I can't tell you the countless times that there's been a need for resources, and I could pick up the phone and John Allen gives us the resources we need. So we have a great relationship. I cherish the relationship. I consider John a friend. We work well together, and I appreciate that. And I see the difference that it makes. He even has units on Central helping us. We'll take all the help. I don't care who cleans up Central. Help us do it. But they're also helping us prove, and you've heard his frustration lately, they're helping us prove that the criminal justice system needs resources to get these individuals too. As for Metro Detention Center, it is a 30-year visual that you just explained to me. For 30 years, I've seen us backlogged at the jail. They've made improvements, they've made changes. We consistently our officers know they could wake chain of command up when they slow down. But the one thing I always tell my commanders is, I don't ever want to hear a commander said, the jail is backed up, stop arresting. We will catch up at some point. You keep your foot on the gas pedal and we keep moving forward. And we've done a lot of things to change medical intake. They have staffing shortages also, which leads to the challenges. And we work through it each and every day, and we recognize that they too are short resources. They don't have, I think at one point I heard they had like only 58% of the staffing that they needed to run the jail. So everybody's strapped with resources, everybody's strapped with money, but you know what? We have the ability and the partnerships to pick up the phone and call, and I think that's the biggest improvement I've seen. And we communicate through problems and we try to solve issues, but without a doubt, there's always going to be backlogs. They've been backlogs in booking people for 30 years. It frustrates our officers, but I think it's a good frustration because they're frustrated because they want to go back to work and they're stuck in line, and it slows their pace down of doing the work they're committing. We're going to have to continue to work through it, and eventually I'm hopeful that UNMH will finish the development that they're working on, and we will have a wing that's dedicated to prisoners, that we could reduce the number of resources we have there and we could all staff together. Because right now, it comes to beds. If I have 5 people with charges at the hospital, I generally have 5 officers there. And there's a much better way if we could have our own wing to ensure that we just have a limit, thank you very much, of limited number of people at the jail, at the hospital guarding these individuals that are in custody.
Thank you, Chief.
All right, yeah, thank you, Chief Medina, for coming out and making the time to come out here and chat with us and answer our questions. I greatly appreciate it, and And I look forward to what APD is going to do in 2026. So I greatly appreciate it and appreciate your time.
No, I want to thank you guys. You guys are out here, you know, it's, you know, a lot of times you guys are volunteering so many hours, and I just appreciate that you take the time to help ensure that things continue to go forward. So thank you guys for your
you.
service. Thank you.
All right, the next order of business is the Internal Affairs Professional Standards IAPS report from Commander Ryan Nelson.
Good evening. The numbers for November, total cases opened for Internal Affairs Professional Standards was 24 cases, 18 total completed cases, 60 pending cases, and an average date of completion 78 cases. For our top 5 SOPs with sustained findings, we've got 2 on the list. The first is personal code of conduct, and the second is court. In the total completed investigations, we had 10 code of conduct, 4 court, 2 use of on-body recording devices, and then it goes down from there, just single digits for those. If you notice, it's significantly decreased over the months. This is a new program that we've started. It's called the Enhanced Supervisory Intervention Program. It's called the EIS, is what we refer to it in the department. This program allows supervisors to deal with minor policy violations directly with the officer. What I noticed when I came into IAPS is we were supervising the department, and we were taking that ability for supervisors to do that with their officers. That was a significant problem. We wanted to change that. So this had the best avenue for supervisors to take control of minor policy violations again. So you've seen a significant drop, especially with our largest policy violations, which is OBRD. So I think this has so far been a great success. It's a pilot program right now, and we're gonna put it into long-term policy effect beginning of next year.
That's great. Thank you, Commander Nelson. I did have 2 questions off of that. One is, when you're doing those minor conversations with officers and their leadership, are there going to be a way to track that information just to make sure it's trending in make sure we're keeping track of the trends and not seeing any anomalies?
I knew I wasn't going to be able to mention that and then just walk away. So, so the program works like this. If there's a policy violation, it's still reported to IAPS in regards to an IAR. At that point, we look at the individual's history. If they have 2 or less minor policy violations within the last calendar year, then they have the opportunity to receive an ESI from their supervisor. So this is all documented. There's an entire process put in place. It goes back to the chain of command from the commander down, so everybody knows. Everybody sees the name, everybody sees the violation, everybody sees what happens. Then there's a minimum requirement that the supervisor is supposed to accomplish with the officer. Those requirements are, do you understand the policy violation that was violated? And how can we remedy this so it doesn't happen again? So I'll use court as an example. A lot of officers miss court because they get a calendar invite from the district attorney's office, which is more of a it's courtesy, whereas, hey, you have court, so I'm gonna put it on your calendar. That's not the go-to. There's lots of things that are missed in that way. It works 90% plus of the time, but the court docket is the only thing that you're bound to. So you have that conversation with the officer and say, you have to look at your court docket every single day. That is just a courtesy, and that gets explained, and then you don't see that recidivism. So that's an example of how that functions. Another example could be your OBRD and the way that you function it before you get out of the car. You turn on before you get out of the car. That's the best method so that you capture everything, that kind of thing. So we've allowed that process to take place. It's documented on the form about that, what happened, and everybody signs it through the chain of command all the way back, goes back to IEPS, and we upload it. So we keep track of everything.
Awesome. And are you going to be able to put any of that, just overall percentages or numbers on this report, or are you wanting to keep
Yeah,
that out?
I think we can put, and we're working towards it right now. We're working. It's so new. We're working towards. It's broken down in categories right now, and we had to do a backlog when we first started because people hadn't faced discipline yet. So when we implemented this process, there was the backlog. And so we had to offer those officers EISs for that. So it's kind of skewed because you had a couple months crammed into an immediate period of time. So, but we are working on that to provide that information.
Yeah, perfect. And then I did catch one other thing on the third page. Is it third? Yeah, third page was it was just kind of percentage of 56% of all completed investigations had sustained findings. Are we tracking those trends of monthly percentage of sustained findings or anything like that? Or does that make sense?
I'm sorry, what page you? Oh,
Top of the third
second
page. It's kind of in small print, and it took me a second. I was like, wait, hold on. I think there's something there of 56%. And so that's where I'm looking at trends.
Yes.
Right?
I mean,
numbers and trends.
I definitely have a slew of data that I look at regularly. So this, yes, for completed investigations within IAPS, 56% of those have sustained findings. I don't know if this data is also compiling data from area command cases.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if this is compiled in there,
No.
but I think that's what that's referencing.
Yeah. And I just,
Based on the 10 cases, I think this is just IAPS.
okay. Yeah. I don't know if we want to, thinking about it out loud here, if we want to break that down a little bit just for increased transparency of, hey, here are these, maybe by area command, and then number and percentage of like trending, right? Because then we all have bad months, whatever, but I just want to make sure we're seeing trends, and if we're seeing a higher trend, like more sustained cases, like what's going on.
Sure.
And we can get ahead of it.
Sure.
Is kind of how I'm seeing that when you see long-term percentages.
Absolutely. That makes sense.
So, cool. Sorry. Any other questions for Commander? Awesome. Commander Nelson, I appreciate your time in the report.
Thank you.
All right. The next report from APD is Internal Affairs Force Division by Commander Scott Norris.
Good evening. Hope everybody's well tonight. Had a little bit of a different month in November than we've had in the past. You'll notice if you look back at different monthly reports, numbers with regards to use of force and numbers of uses of force in specific area commands are a lot different in November than they have been in the past. If you recall, typically we have the majority of our uses of force usually in the Southeast Area Command. That's always, ranked at the top right there, and I usually give you guys the top three. The Southeast Area Command is not even in the top three for November, which is different than months past, right? In fact, our highest, which is usually one of our lowest this month, is in the Southwest Area Command at 9. Valley stayed high, right? Valley's always usually number 2, but they're at 9. And then the rest were, the rest of the area commands. But I just thought that was a little bit of an outlier, something that was different than we've seen in months past. I don't have an answer for you as to why. It's not because there's less contacts in the Southeast that have been going on in the past. Just sometimes you'll see that a lot of this stuff is cyclical, and that's just kind of the way it flows out. if you look at the difference between, draw your attention to September, October, and November, our uses of force have gone down. From in September, they were at 53, and then they dipped down to 38 in October, and then to 36 in November. Some of that, again, can be a cause because we're no longer looking at shows of force as uses of force. But if you turn the next page, well, actually, don't turn the next page yet. I'll kind of get back to the point I was making with our lower uses of force. But as far as force rate per 1,000 calls for Southwest, it was about 1.8 every 1,000 calls where we would end up using force. And not much deviation between the next number 2 and number 3 would be Valley, which was 1.3, and Foothills at every 1 arrest per 1,000 calls, there would be a use of force. For the Southwest, the force rate per 100 custodial arrests, so every time we'd arrest 100 people, we had 6.6 uses of force, which is a little high than in months past. And with the Foothills in the Northwest, they were at about 2.8, but their numbers were still lower than the Southwest and the Valley. Age range, that was a little different this month as well. If you recall, people between the ages of 30 and 39, we'd get most of our uses of force with, or engaged in use of force incident. For the month of November, it was 17 for between the ages of 20 and 29, which is 7 more than the 30 and 39, which is, we had 10. So that was a little bit of different too than what we've seen in the past. 63% of the individuals we involved in use of force, there was no behavioral health component identified. 11% a behavioral health component was identified, and 26% of an unknown. Pretty much the same with alcohol and drugs. We're always going to be high on that in uses of force. It was 62% of the uses of force we had involved some sort of intoxicating liquor or drug. What I was going to tell you was, as far as the uses of force being down, if you turn to the final call types and types of force used, you'll see that the numbers are down as well, with empty hand control being at 14 and empty hand takedowns being at 19. Now, those are always going to be our higher numbers of force when we're doing some sort of empty hand technique, but even those numbers are down citywide. So that tells me that not just the fact that we're not looking at shows of force as uses of force is not the main cause of why our uses of force are down in the month of November. Suspicious persons and vehicles, about 10 of those use of force incidents involved suspicious persons or vehicles. And then the next highest one was where somebody had a warrant for their arrest. As far as my team, my division, for our level 1 unit, they completed 6 total investigations with an average day of completion about 14.3 days. So we're still falling in within those timelines that we maintained post-settlement agreement and that we will continue to maintain. With our level 2 and 3 team, 43 complete investigations, and the average days was about 82.1. So we're still under that 90 days, where we do have a case every once in a while that we'll ask for an extension for that gives us 120 days, whether it be because if it's an officer-involved shooting or just a case that involves a lot of witnesses or a lot of officers, or we start kind of pulling on that string and some other things start to unravel that we need to make sure we get squared away. So that's why we would ask for those extensions. We only had 1 out of policy out of those 36 uses of force for this month, and that out of policy was in the Southeast. And I will stand for any questions.
Thank you, Commander Norris. I appreciate it. Yeah, I was looking through this report earlier, and interesting.
Yeah.
Right, just something that's outside of the norm, which not a bad thing, just something
just different.
Yeah. Board members who have any questions? Unfortunately, I got to be the broken record, just because I don't want to make sure we don't lose sight of it, is I don't know if we showed where we're going to track shows of force. And I just was wondering where we stand on that for.
Well, we're still tracking shows of force. If you turn to the last second to last page, I'm sorry, yeah, it would be the second to last page. It says cases where shows of force are the only method applied by month. So we're still tracking those.
Got it,
Because
okay.
what officers have to do when they have a show of force is they do have to, basically within the platform that we use to write incident reports, there's a show of force box. And they have to check that box, and then there's a certain thing that they have, certain criteria that they have to meet in articulating that show of force, and then that show of force gets reviewed by a supervisor. So we're still tracking shows of force.
Cool. Okay, no, that's where it was. I guess I
Okay.
just missed it because gonna be weird. I like color, and then my eyes don't catch color.
Sure.
So with that, I then noticed too, and is it just calculation numbers and just getting used to it? And that, I'm happy with that response of October and November, they are high, they're 10 digits or 10 to 20 higher than the other shows of forces from that same calendar year. I'm just curious if it was just because you're now calculating it or calculating it differently, or what?
I honestly, I really don't have an answer for you on that. I don't know why those numbers are why they are. It could be, honestly, it could be an issue, maybe issues or officers erring on the side of caution, saying, hey, I had a show of force, and going that way just because they want to make sure that they don't get, there's a sanction tied to not reporting a show of force. So, and we found a lot of that when we were looking at shows of force as uses of force during our investigations, where they would report a show of force. We would review it and be like, that doesn't meet the criteria of a show of force. So it may be over-reporting and an abundance of caution.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. I just want to make sure we're seeing those numbers and just want to make sure we're keeping an eye on them too, just so we're, because I'm weird, as you know. I know, you can all agree. You can all admit it. Awesome. Thank you, Commander.
Okay.
All right. The next report from the city departments is ACS Deputy Director Jeffrey Bustamante.
Hey everybody, I'll make this one a little bit briefer, but we continue. I sent over some reports for our November and October. You can kind of see the trends. I think highlights, Seasons of Nonviolence continues, has been really successful. We had Freebirds last month, which I think I mentioned because we met right after that. And that was really successful. Pivoting to next week, we have our community holiday party where we'll be giving away toys. APD and AFR are also kind partners and show up and really support the community there as well. And then we'll have free food, some games, a lot of good stuff. So December 19th at our facility, 4 to 7 p.m. if you want to swing by. Also, our winter transportation, I think, is the big one right now that started on November 1st. It's done probably about 600 transports to date, right around there. We know that goes up right around now. It also has been unseasonably warm, right? Like the high today was what, 20 degrees higher, I think, over the historic average. And so that always impacts. Like when we see it dipping down into the teens, 20s at night is when we see that service utilized more. But it is still being used. And then those are the major highlights, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Deputy Director. Any questions?
Just a brief one. I was curious. I don't know what golden opportunity means.
Of course, Chairman Member Weimark. So our Golden Opportunity is a program that we started with AFR that if they administer naloxone and an individual, as they sober up and they're talking to them, is prepared to go immediately into services, which means, so they administer naloxone, but you can follow up with Suboxone and get wraparound services of case management and the rest. We will actually mobilize teams to go to that individual exactly where they are and get them into that opportunity to do better, to food support, food boxes, rental assistance, whatever it might be, to get them into a more sustainable life. So that's
Okay.
what that one is.
Super.
Thank you, Deputy Director. Any other questions? Well, thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Thanks for the report. All right, next order of business is the report from the City Attorney, Lindsay Roseborough, the Managing Attorney.
Good evening, Board. I don't have a lot of updates for you tonight. For in part my team, the team within the City Attorney's Office that advises APD. It's been a policy-heavy month in reviewing, as perhaps those of you who attend the policy subcommittee might be aware. But one update in particular that I believe I mentioned in passing in a prior update has to do with a case pending before the New Mexico Supreme Court. It's related to inventory searches, which has been discussed with this court before, or I'm sorry, with this board before, as to policies related to changes in case law around inventory searches. The case, State v. Huerta, is up on appeal to the Supreme Court. The city submitted an amicus brief asking the Supreme Court to accept cert, meaning to take the case up. They don't have to, they get to decide whether or not they take the case. And we submitted a brief asking them to take the question as it being a significant question of law that the New Mexico Supreme Court ought to weigh in on, as it had a significant impact for the city of Albuquerque. They have ordered briefing. We have filed a notice of intent to file another amicus brief, which is, again, a friend of the court brief, and that's our opportunity to describe to the Supreme Court why this change in this case law has had a significant impact on the city and the Albuquerque Police Department. And so that is something that we've also been working on. And I stand for any further questions.
Any questions? All right, thank you so much, I appreciate
Thank you.
it. The next order of business is the report from the City Council, Chris Sylvan, City Council Services.
Thank you, Chair. Honorable Board, Chris Sylvan, Albuquerque City Council. The update that I have for you tonight is Monday, the 15th will be the last City Council meeting of the year, and at that meeting, OC 25-55, it's the Civilian Police Oversight Agency Semi-Annual Report, January to June 2025, and that will be heard at that council meeting. And I want to give props to the agency as well, because I have to brief the councilors on reports like this, and this report was really well done, so I appreciate that, and it was very timely as well. So that's the update we have there. And the other update is next week we should be scheduling the interviews with the potential board members before the councilors leave town with the councilors. So that's my update for you tonight. Stand for any questions.
Thank you, I appreciate it. That's awesome. That shout out to Deputy Director of Policy and all of CPOA, and also Policy Analyst Gabe for getting that semi-annual report done. They did great work. It's awesome. And then, yeah, board members, any questions? No? Nope. Thank you so much, Mr. Sullivan. I appreciate it. All right. Next up is a report from Community Policing Council.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the board. Marchisa, the Community Policing Council Office Assistant. So this month on Saturday, December 6th, we had our CPC year-end dinner. We had about 70 to 80 people who attended from each of the 7 councils, UCPC, APD, and the community. And then we did have Council Chairs Phil Jameson address the crowd about CPC, and Angelo Ragland with the UCPC. Our keynote speaker was Anthony Mays, the director of the CNM Law Enforcement Academy. There was a plaque that was given to APD Chief Harold Medina for a commendable service to the CPC. Our dinner went well. All attended got to meet and network with each other. Our second advertising agreement with the KKOB radio, it was started on December 1st and will run through February nightly during drive home times and night times. The ads are going to highlight the benefits of serving the CPC. Our meetings for 2025 have concluded, and we'll pick up in 2026 with the Southwest Council meeting on January 7th, 2026. We are in the process of scheduling our yearly meeting with Mayor Keller, which happens about in January. And we are looking to recombine the University and Southeast CPCs for the 2026 calendar year. The council was split over a year ago, but their meetings for both are sparse, so we're gonna see if we can combine them for next year. And we are scheduled to do our elections in the councils in January for each of the CPCs. And I stand for questions.
Thank you very much. Board members, any questions? Thank you so much. I appreciate
Thank
it. All right. Next order of business is the report from the mayor's office by Mr. Doug Small. He's not here. So we will move on to the report from the CPOA by Executive Director Diane McDermott.
Thank you, Chair and Board. So the December report, CPOA received 54 complaint intakes from November 1st through November 30th. 11 were assigned for investigation between CPOA and a few with IA. 25 were driving complaints that again were resolved with the supervisors. 18 were miscellaneous where again either insufficient information was provided, it was determined that APD personnel were not involved, or the complaint was resolved in some other informal satisfaction through information. We did receive 4 commendations. The board last month had wanted a presentation from the bomb squad, particularly to review drone usage. I know the chief mentioned a lot about some drone advancements, so I know the board would really like to look forward to that. If you can please email me some days in January or February. I know we were shooting for January, but just depending either January or February, that's going to work for all board members so that you can attend. That would be great. And then if you also have any specific topics or questions that you want to make sure are covered, much like we did with the SWAT one, so that I can make sure that they answer the things that you're most interested in. So just individually, if you want to send me those emails, and then we can figure out a good day or time to get that scheduled for you after the holidays. As Mr. Sylvan already said, the council is going to hear the semi-annual report. Again, I echo my appreciation for my deputy director and policy analyst, Gabe and Ali. They've done an amazing job. I get to look at it and say, yeah, it looks good, but they do all the hard work. And that will be presented, and both the deputy director and I will be available to answer any questions if the council has any for that meeting. We are continuing hiring our efforts for 2 investigators and an administrative assistant. Our new data analyst will be starting on Monday, so we've filled that position. So it'll take a little bit, of course, for him to get his feet wet and figure all this stuff out, but he'll be up and helping Gabe do all the work that needs to be done. We did give a presentation, and we do this a lot, but I'll just highlight it since we just did it. We gave a presentation to the 133rd cadet class that graduated on December 1st. We always provide presentations to the cadets so that they understand what the expectations are of when they receive communication from us, what we are, what we do, where we're coming from. So it really helps give them, I think, some perspective of what types of, we go over things like what kind of SOPs do officers most often encounter in these investigations and things like that. That kind of gives them a good framework. Hopefully they remember some of those pieces when they go on out into the field. And then we also did a presentation to the Citizens Police Academy on December 9th. And we do that all the time too. And it's to, again, explain to those community members who are interested in the police department that the CPOA is a partner or a collaborative piece of the overall policing in Albuquerque. The work of the board, the importance of the policy work and everything that the board does. And then we also talk about community policing councils to hopefully garner more membership and explain that these are the avenues that people can stay involved and be interested in the community and in the police department. So we always do that, but since we just did that this last week, I wanted to make mention of it. There is a tentative plan to have more engagement with the developers of the use of force policy suite beyond the normal commentary period, PPRB, and the 35-day review. So we know we've seen some preview. There's going to be a lot of changes coming up with the policy suite, and we thought that it would be best to have some more insight from the framers of how that came about and some of the background of why certain things are changing. So you'll hear more about this, but there is a plan to have some special policy subcommittee meeting to kind of go over that pre-policy procedures review board, and then Hopefully that will make the Policy and Procedure Review Board process a little smoother, because we'll get some insight and some questions maybe answered before that hits. And then once that PPRB process concludes, then we'll have some other meetings for, again, the board to have more input, as well as community, having some special sessions for stakeholders, old amicus, that kind of thing. So that's just something to be on the lookout. We're talking mid-January, February timeframe, so just something to be aware of. And then the last thing, I believe you're already aware, but the Operations Review Commander, Ingram, will be retiring. So for now, if you need a ride along, just please reach out to the area commander. If you have any difficulty, though, scheduling that, please reach out to either myself or Deputy Director Abbasi, and we will, facilitate and coordinate getting you those for your training. And that is all I have.
Thank you, Deputy Director. I did.
Yeah, you did.
Oh, sorry, Executive Director. Sorry. Thank you for letting me know, because it's my brain was on the use of force policy suites, because Vice Chair Calderon is going to kick me under the table for this one. If there's going to be that much change to the policy suite, is it worth trying to do like the PPRB review to have more board members in there and then listed as a possible quorum, so then all board members are aware, because that is a priority for this board?
So we did discuss it also with our legal, and so depending on, we'll see what it looks like, but yes, we can post a notice of quorum. The board members that are not members of that subcommittee would mostly be in attendance just to kind of hear the information. They would not be participating in any recommendations or votes, to make it clear there. And on the notice, we would put that as a kind of a clear statement. So yes, it's possible. We just have to make sure we have certain things noticed and certain decorum or process issues in place before that to happen.
As long as a very opinionated board member can ask questions and not vote, but at least ask questions, I wouldn't see a problem with that.
So we'll kind of, I think, get there when we get there. But
Yeah, I was gonna say that, right? The goal is to have it as do as much of the pre-work prior to getting to a board like this, right?
Right.
So we can come very structured, very formalized. We'll work with council to make sure what we can and cannot do, and the do's and don'ts and stuff like that. So it's public known for us, public for the public, and it's straight guidelines, because everyone's a tight ship in those meetings. And so we'll make sure we're aware of what we can and can't do.
Yep.
But the goal is to have that so we can at a minimum.
Yeah, even if it's just for us to listen to, it'd be great just for us to hear some of the background before we ask questions, is kind of what I'm.
That's our intention. We want to be involved as much as we can from the get-go. So we don't get here and have 1,000 questions that they can't answer in the moment.
Right, yep, okay. That was the one question, sorry. And there's a board member that likes to ask questions.
Never.
Thank you, Executive Director, because I didn't butcher the title on that one. All right, the next item up, next order of business is public comment. Ms. Brella, we do not have any written. Do we have anyone signed up for public comment?
Mr. Chairman, there is no one signed up for public comment here today.
Thank you, Ms. Brill. All right. Next order of business is the serious use of force cases. The first use of force case we have is APD case 24-009-8959, presented by Member Budenaro.
Thank you, Chair. This case occurred on December 1st, 2024, case number 24-009-8959. It involved uses of level 3 uses of force, followed with an escape in custody incident as well. On December 1st, 2024, at approximately 12:25, officers were dispatched to Los Altos Golf Course at 9717 Copper Avenue Northeast in reference to a stolen golf cart belonging to the business. The caller advised that the GPS tracker on the golf cart showed it to be near Tomasita and Diana. Officers located the cart at 812 Diana Place Northeast and contacted APD who contacted AP, who was detained, handcuffed, and seated on a retaining wall without incident. The consistent search revealed a golf cart key in his pocket. After being read his Miranda rights, AP was advised that he was under arrest and placed in the back of a patrol vehicle. A short time later, officers observed that AP's seatbelt had been removed and he had slipped his handcuffs to the front. As officers attempted to resecure him, AP fled on foot while still handcuffed. Officers pursued, used empty hand control to detain him. During the struggle, AP complained of wrist pain, and a minor abrasion was later observed on his right wrist. When AP refused to sit down to have his handcuffs adjusted, officers used a controlled leg sweep to safely bring him to the ground. This action was deemed within policy and objectively reasonable. While later being evaluated at the Casement Hospital, AP fled for a second time from Officer 3, but was quickly apprehended using an empty hand takedown. Both officers and AP had sustained minor abrasions during that incident. As far as medical care on the scene was provided, injuries to AP: sustained abrasion on his right wrist. Officer 3 sustained a scratch on his right hand. Behavior after custody: AP continued to resist after being taken into custody again. Charges filed were unlawfully taking a motor vehicle, escape from the custody of a police officer ×2, battery of a healthcare worker, tampering with evidence, and larceny over $500. Internal Affairs Force Division determined the use of force, including multiple empty hand control techniques and leg sweeps, were objectively reasonable, necessary within APD policy. There were no real deficiencies in tactics outside of one officer was cited for language during the interaction with Mr. AP.
Oh, I'm having problems. Thank you, Member Budinaro. Deputy Director Ross, is there anything the CPOA would like to add?
Yes, Chair, members of the board, just a few things. This incident, it was classified as a level 3 use of force because an empty hand technique was applied on a subject who was already handcuffed. As Member Budinaro stated, the individual stole a golf cart with a tracker on it, and once police arrived, he attempted to, he slipped his handcuffs up front, unbuckled his seatbelt. When they were repositioning those handcuffs, he attempted to flee. Officer utilized empty hand control to control his actions, and he then complained of a wrist pain. He was transported to the hospital for evaluation, where he attempted to flee the second time from the officers. Based on the objective evidence that was documented in the investigation, and the review of OBRD indicated that the abrasions were consistent with the actions taken by this individual and his active resistance rather than officer applying force on him. The force was found to be minimal, reasonable, and necessary by IAFD. There were other potential conduct-related issues that were addressed by the department appropriately.
Thank you, Deputy Director. Commander Norris, is there anything that you would like to add?
Nothing to add at this point.
I have a quick question
Yes.
for you, Commander. From what I saw, the officer only repeated what the offender had said, and was cited for it. Is that what was the policy violation?
No, there were some other things that were said by this particular officer that we deemed that were unprofessional, and basically trying to force us, especially with a newer officer, not to really conduct himself in that type of manner. I think if we're not discouraging behavior like that early in a career, then we're encouraging it. I'm assuming you're talking about language and professionalism. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, well, the AP had said, dropped an F-bomb, and the officer repeated it.
Right.
And I was wondering, was that the thing that was?
Well, it was kind of a number of things kind of put together. That wasn't
the only one?
Yeah, that wasn't the only issue. Yes, sir.
Yeah, that was going to be one of my questions. And then another question is, in the hospital, why or would there ever be a situation where you'd want to restrain the vehicle to the bed or the gurney, the person, via like a handcuff, so like handcuff over the other handcuff to a bed, something like that? Is that?
Yes, there would be. They
Okay.
failed at that.
I'm sorry?
It was a failure on their end.
Okay,
They should've-
that was, I saw that, I wondered why they didn't do that.
It's a failure.
Okay, cool.
They weren't using, to be frank, they weren't using their head. They got complacent. We got it, and we addressed that through a mandatory training referral.
Awesome.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
All right, so at least I saw something and went, oh, okay, okay. Awesome. I appreciate the candor.
Sure.
Any other questions for the board members? No? All right, then I make a motion that the Civilian Police Oversight Advisory Board affirms and upholds the finding of APD Internal Affairs Force Division investigation for APD case 24-009-8959. May I get a second?
Second.
Thank you, Member Budinaro. Ms. Perla, can I get a roll call vote, please?
Chair Boliana,
Affirmed.
Member Budinaro,
Affirmed.
Vice Chair Calderon,
Affirm.
Member Weimer.
Affirmed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That motion passed unanimously.
Thank you, Ms. Perla. The next APD case for review is 24-010-1133, presented by Member Weimark.
The date was December 9th, 2024. The time was, well, there are two different times, but 22:45, 22:37, there's not a huge difference, not even remotely.
No.
It was a level 3, which is why we're doing this. And Officer 1, Canine Apprehension Bite in Policy. Other involved officers were Officers 2, 3, and 4, and 5, and the involved individual was EC. At approximately 22:37 hours, Officer 5 was dispatched to the Goodwill store at 5000 San Mateo in reference to a commercial burglary. The male, later identified as EC, was spotted by security cameras in the building. Officer 1 and K9 PSD were dispatched, and he found an entry hole in the northeast of the building. Using a key to get in, Officers 3, 4, 2, and 1 saw EC running towards the back. After Officer 1 gave unheeded commands and force warnings, he let his PSD go. The PSD searched the donations room and picked up on a human scent and went in between the boxes while the officers waited. 1 minute later, they heard someone yell, and they climbed up and across boxes to find EC. Officer 1 grabbed his PSD to release EC, which was complicated, as EC had his leg wrapped around the PSD and was pulling against his body. The force used was reasonable, minimal, and necessary. EC's behavior was cooperative once he was taken into custody. Officer 4 had an injury to his ankle and knees because of climbing over the boxes. EC had injuries to his left forearm, upper arm, wrist, and hand, and was charged with commercial burglary and possession of burglary tools and criminal damage. No other uses of force were located for him. No violations of standard operating procedures of personnel rules and regulations or administrative instructions were identified. No deficiencies or concerns were identified in tactics, training, policy, equipment, or supervision.
Thank you, Member Weimark. Deputy Director, does the CPOA have anything they'd like to add?
Yes, Chair, members of the board. Well, this case involves the apprehension of a suspect who entered unauthorized into a commercial premises using a PSD. Upon arrival, the officers, they entered the premises and confirmed that the reporting party was willing to press charges if an individual was located. In this case, the officers also observed signs of forced entry into the premises. In accordance with the standard practices for these calls where there are break-ins into commercial premises, a K9 was requested to assist in locating the individual. The deployment of PSD per the department policy, it's considered a low-level force option under such circumstances because it reduces the likelihood and risks of a deadly encounter and also enhances officers' safety during these searches. When the PSD was deployed, there were multiple verbal warnings that were issued prior to the deployment by the handler. The clarity and the pace of those announcements appear to warrant some improvement based on our observation and based on our review. They were delivered rapidly, and the content could be perceived as unclear by the listener. The PST located Mr. C, who was the individual who broke in, approximately 45 to 50 minutes after the search began. The search area consisted of a large warehouse, which contained a lot of unwashed donated clothing, which was noted in the investigation as affecting the sense of smell for the PST. Mr. C, he was located hiding behind the boxes. The PST made contact with him. Officer did initially struggle to remove the PST quickly, and the investigation documented that Mr. C had his legs wrapped around the PST, and he was in the area which was hard to reach. He was hiding behind the boxes. He was transported to the hospital for medical evaluation. He was cleared and was transported to MDC. The force in this case was again classified as a level 3 use of force because of the canine bite, and the use of force was considered within policy by IFT.
Thank you, Deputy Director. Commander Norris, is there anything you'd like to add?
Nothing at this point, no.
Board members, any questions? No?
No.
All right, then I make a motion that the Civilian Police Oversight Advisory Board affirms and upholds the finding of APD Internal Affairs Force Division investigation for APD case 24-0101133. May I get a second?
Second.
Thank you, Member Weimar. Ms. Burley, can I get a roll call vote, please?
Chair Bolianis.
Affirmed.
Member Budenara.
Affirmed.
Vice Chair Calderon.
Affirm.
Member Weimar.
Affirmed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That motion passed unanimously.
Thank you, Ms. Burley. The next order of business is officer-involved shooting cases. The APD case is 25-000-7261, presented by myself. The date of incident was January 26, 2025 at approximately 21:44 hours near Woodland Avenue in Albuquerque on the northeast side. The APD detectives responded to an alarmed takeover robbery at a Walgreens on 9700 Manal, where two suspects later identified as Mr. H and Mr. L stole cash drawers displaying firearms and fired around inside the store. The suspects also took customers' keys with Apple Tag Tracker using GPS devices in the stolen cash, and the Apple Tag the detectives located the suspects later, still in the northeast area. While conducting surveillance, the detectives observed Mr. H armed with a AR-style rifle matching the robbery surveillance photos, and Mr. W exited the residence. The pair attempted to break into multiple vehicles, including unmarked APD vehicles occupied by plainclothes officers. The use of forces in this was level 3 critical firearms discharge, 3 rifles, and then 1 shotgun, and then firearm pointing. Mr. H was taken into custody after being struck by 3 rifle rounds, and Mr. W fled but was later apprehended. All investigated use of forces were determined to be objectively reasonable and within APD policy. The individual's behavior, Mr. H was deceased, but Mr. W was cooperative. Officers were not injured, but Mr. H had 3 wounds. There were 3 other use of force cases located for Mr. H, but none for Mr. W. There was a policy recommendation submitted, but no other deficiencies were located, no violations identified. Deputy Director Abbasi, is there anything the CPOA would like to add?
Chair, no, you pretty much covered all the aspects of this case. The force, again, was found to be minimal, reasonable, and necessary. as there was a deadly threat posed by the suspect, in this case at the time when the shots were fired by the officer. So, yeah, that's all I have.
Thank you, Deputy Director. Commander Norris, is there anything that you would like to add?
Nothing to add right now.
Board members, any questions for Commander Norris?
Only question, on that policy recommendation you guys submitted, did you hear anything back from that?
No, I have not yet, no.
Thank you.
Yeah, no questions for me. I just am impressed that the officers, they were being approached, and so I'm impressed that they kept their cool. So that's good on the officers for not engaging sooner.
Thank you.
I don't know if I will. I would probably be scared, and I can't use the language up here. But no, that good on the officers, on the detective work for that.
Thank you.
So with that, I make a motion that the Civilian Police Oversight Advisory Board affirms and upholds the finding of APD's Internal Affairs Force Division investigation for APD case 25-00072661. May I get a second?
Second.
Thank you, Member Budinaro. Ms. Barella, can I get a roll call vote, please?
Chair Bolianek,
Affirmed.
Member Budinaro,
Affirmed.
Vice Chair Calderon,
Affirm.
Member Weimer.
Affirmed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That motion passed unanimously.
Thank you, Ms. Barella. Next order of business is the in-custody death case, APD case 25-0006-106, presented by Vice Chair Calderon.
Thank you, Chair. APD case number 25-0006-106. Date of case was January 22nd of 2025. Use of force that was used was none. For public knowledge, this is a suicide case within our in-custody death policy.
Welcome back. I make a motion to come out of dinner break. Can I get a second?
I second that motion.
Thank you, Vice Chair Calderon. Ms. Barilla, can I get a roll call vote, please?
Yes, you may. Chair Bolianis,
Approved.
Member Budenaro,
Approved.
Vice Chair Calderon,
Approved.
Member Weimer.
Approved.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That motion passed unanimously.
Thank you, Ms. Barilla. The next order of business is reports from the CPOA-B subcommittees. The first one is, first and only one, is Policies and Procedure Review Subcommittee by by Vice Chair Calderon.
Thank you, Chair. The Policies and Procedure Review Subcommittee met on December 4th at 3 p.m. A report from that subcommittee will be followed in the next agenda item. Our next meeting will be Friday, January 2nd, 2026 at 3 p.m. at the CPOA offices. A notice will be posted as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Any questions from the board members? No? All right, let's move on to the next order of business, which is discussion of possible action items. And the first one up is the CPOA-B Chair participation in the CPOA monthly meeting with City Council staff. Executive Director McDermott.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to introduce this item. So this is just to give you a little background here. Since the board operates as an entity, and so when a member is seeking information or is wanting to have a meeting with an outside entity like City Council or the mayor or APD people or something like that, the idea is that whatever that member is, come to the board first to advise, hey, I think it'd be beneficial to have this meeting. It's for transparency. It's because the board itself, again, has to act as an entity, and it's not, individual members with individual ideas and agendas. So the meetings should generally be for information gathering, just making sure that the communication is open and good. So this specific meeting that was being contemplated, the chair and the agency meet on a bi-weekly basis and discuss, and the chair had raised the issue since we as staff do meet with the council services staff, Mr. Sylvan, as well as a couple of others, and the CCO, who is the contract compliance officer who looks over the board as well as the agency. And so the chair had raised, hey, maybe there'd be times that obviously some information would be good, like direct, as opposed to, third hand, that type of thing. So we discussed it with council staff, and council staff said, yeah, that would be fine, that would be a good idea. There will be opportunities and times in which the agency and the council staff will still have individual meetings that won't be a part of the board or the chair or whoever. But the idea of the board representative, more likely being the chair, being at those meetings and having some, again, receiving information, hearing what's going on. It's usually agency stuff, but sometimes it is board appointments and interviews and things like that. So Mr. Sylvan, as far as I understood, was good with it, and so we just wanted to, bring it, obviously, Chair Bolianis wanted to bring it up to the board so that for transparency, for awareness, that the board knows that would be happening. If the board wants it, that's why it's going to be a vote item, if the board wants that to happen. And this is just to kind of set this type of precedent in motion for any time there's a board member desiring to meet with some entity, that it is, again, brought before the board, it's transparent, it's clear, and that the board business is, again, mostly for listening, but if there is something the board wants to have conveyed, that you all know about it and agree upon it, as opposed to just member so-and-so wants this. No, the board wants this. So that's just kind of to give you the stage of it.
Thank you, Executive Director McDermott. Yeah, so this was kind of my idea, right? Just since we are appointed by City Council staff, we want to make sure we're having that line of communication open. And so I'm open for, and I was going to ask Mr. Sylvan what he thought too, and it sounds like you already kind of gave the thumbs up. So I just want to make sure we're all aware and know and go, this is a good idea, right? Just more communication, break it down silos.
Chair, board, yeah, City Council staff and myself included, we're good with this. And to echo the director's words, the best approach would be to make sure, for calendar invites and stuff, that they don't originate from council staff, but they originate that the CCO and the agency, they have a standing invite, and it'd be best if they forward that to whoever shows up, so that way the council is still kind of at an arm's length.
Yep. Nope, that's a great call out. I appreciate that. So, so with that, board members, do you have any questions, comments, concerns? No? Vice Chair? All right, then with that, I make a motion that the CPOA be board chair or designee can participate in the CPOA monthly meetings with the city council staff once the meetings are forwarded and deemed appropriate by the executive director. Can I get a second?
Second.
Thank you, Member Loymark. Ms. Barilla, can I get a roll call vote, please?
Chair Boliana,
Approved.
Member Budenaro,
Approved.
Vice Chair Calderon,
Approved.
Member Weimar.
Approved.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, that motion passed unanimously.
Thank you, Ms. Barilla, and thank you, Mr. Sullivan and Executive Director McDermott for making this happen. The next order of business is APD policies, and the first is recommendations, and that first one up is SOP 1-64, formerly 2-12 and 6-9 K-9 unit. Oh, did I say, sorry, 4-12, I apologize, because I can read numbers. I will turn it over to Mr. Policy Analyst Gabe.
I submitted quite a few email recommendations, or I wouldn't even call them recommendations, there are more considerations about how this policy interacts with its paired policy, which is 223, the use of the K-9 unit. As this policy is being updated, I compared the two documents and I found all the instances of where I thought these policies weren't perfectly overlapping or maybe could be inconsistent in some areas. So I sent those over to the authors of 164 for their consideration. 223 is coming up again soon, so many of these might be, any of these inconsistencies, if there are inconsistencies, might be fixed in that future revision of that policy. That's why I don't expect necessarily a formal response to the dozen considerations I sent over there. I just wanted them to be aware of them, of what I pointed out. Moving on to the second one, which is a specific policy. So there was a notable revision that occurred during PPRB meeting. It has to do with the subsection of 164.5B2FV. I believe it's on page 5 of the policy. So the policy used to say, formally, it said, deploy the PSDs in the following circumstances. Down the list it says, to locate individuals suspected of committing a misdemeanor crime when the K-9 unit sergeant approves a search with a muzzled PSD, police service dog. Now, it was edited in PPRB to say, deploy the PSDs in the following circumstance. To locate the individuals suspected of committing a misdemeanor crime when the K-9 sergeant approves a search based on the totality of circumstances. The policy authors stated that the muzzle makes the K-9 less effective and puts the animal at greater risk because it is unable to defend itself. The reason this is being brought forward to the board, why it was discussed in the subcommittee meeting, is because since it occurred in PPRB, my brain wasn't working fast enough in the meeting to properly ask all of these questions or consider these recommendations in the meeting. But this is a substantial change, right? To change from approves a search with a muzzled police service dog, speaking about misdemeanor crimes, to just a call based on the totality of the circumstances. So I thought it's something that deserved greater consideration. And in subcommittee, we discussed some potential, if we find them necessary, limitations that could come, or examples that could come underneath that language, such as add reasonably believed to be armed. That's something that comes out of the policy earlier in the from other language in that policy. You could add misdemeanor crime involving violence, threatened violence, or a credible oncoming risk to kind of limit this to a certain kind of situation or a particular threat. We even considered this specific directive may not be necessary, or at least from our point of view, because this is kind of a much more general directive than the ones before it. If you look at the policy under F, where it says deploy the police service dogs in the following circumstances, there's 4 others that are pretty encompassing. The V5, to locate individuals suspected of committing crime, the one we're talking about, seems very much more generalized, kind of a catch-all, while the other ones are specific to building searches, sometimes, or they're only specific to felony crimes or violent crimes. So putting that out there to the board as just kind of for open discussion about how if we feel any limiting language or really anything needs to be done with that new directive.
So yeah, the premise behind it is just because of that language change. And so to hopefully, as you see down there, like add reasonably believed to be armed or something to the effect of that. Obviously, as Gabe says in lots of the meetings, is that we're not directing what they should put in there, but just giving examples of what could be in there that they see would be beneficial. Especially just going from the difference of, unmuzzled to essentially unmuzzled, which makes sense for the police, the canine, because we want them to be able to defend itself. If the armed assailant does something to the dog, we want the dog to be able to defend itself as well, right? So we don't want, I think that's okay, but we just gotta make sure we don't leave it so broad as it states currently. And so its recommendations, those ones below, we're not 100% sure will be the best language, but that's why we want to put forth this to ensure that we give them options to think about.
Board members, any thoughts?
No, the only thought I had was a couple of things, actually. So they did not want to have anything to do with the muzzled, correct?
Right.
Okay. Reasonably, this meeting.
And on that point, sorry, I don't want to interrupt your train of thought, but I struggle to speak on whether, the muzzling of the PSD, I certainly don't have the expertise to speak on how a police service dog is best used in this scenario. I just know that is quite the difference. And it was the deputy director that came into my office after the PPR meeting. He said, it is, these canines they're not like most dogs, right? If they just turn a corner and, it could be, and if they're not muzzled, right, this could be an incident of force, right, by the dog, just based off of, because it has that ability. And so that's a pretty big, but I can't speak to, I certainly don't want to tell the dog handlers how to best use their dogs, but there is something that change about taking the muzzle out really changes that directive, such that it kind of opens the door to using these animals in much more circumstances.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting point. I do want to call out because I remember asking the difference between just accidental bite and the direct bite, and there is no difference from a use of force perspective from a level 3. So, but that being said, and I do want to let's call out, no matter what type of direction or involuntary bite is a level 3 use of force, that is still harming a police service dog is still a crime. And so, to their point, they want to be defended, and it also enables them to perform their jobs better without that muzzle. Right, isn't that the self-defense one? I don't know about the muzzle one. I'm not a dog expert, so I'll have to take APD's statement on that. But going to the recommendation for the wording, I do think adding, and this would be the second bullet point of misdemeanor crime involving violence, threat of violence, or a credible ongoing risk, I think is very, very broad, but I think it's also very descriptive at the same time to what it can do, as well as being located and removing suspect, right? Because I think those are all valid points to make it still impactful and getting what they need to done, with still providing that realm of when they can deploy a PSD. Right, because I think too this is around when to deploy. And I think the more guidance we have around that, the better. Right?
No, I think the only thing that was concerning, misdemeanor. What's a misdemeanor crime? Shoplifting, things like that. And,
yeah, that was our concern during our policy meeting, was how low level of a misdemeanor, right? Are you going to send
You're going to send it out on a jaywalker?
Right, exactly. And that's why I think that misdemeanor crime involving violence, threat, violence, or credible ongoing risks puts that parameters, but still keeps it broad enough to be able to enable the use of a PSD appropriately.
Makes sense.
Right. And so, to be honest with you, that was my favorite one out of the recommendations that I liked.
Yeah, I'm thinking back to the use of force case that Member Weimar did, I believe, earlier, was technically that was a misdemeanor pressing charges. Would that be allowed to deploy a PSD with the new deployment parameters? That's just an interesting question that I'm thinking of now, right? Because are they, and this is where I think it goes to the officers of identifying ongoing, and let's, based upon the one is a credible ongoing risk or threat of violence, right? And as long as they can articulate that, that helps, right? And that it's going to improve the officer's articulation and way to report, which I think is helpful. So I just want to call that out because we have a real life example that we just went through, right?
So what you're saying, if I'm hearing you correctly, so what I'm saying now, so what you're saying, if I'm hearing you correctly, is that that case, with this new language, they'd get the dog with the muzzle going after the gentleman? No? Okay.
No.
Then I'm not hearing you correctly.
The muzzle language was removed for the updated policy.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay. Then I missed the boat completely, I'm sorry.
No, it's more of, with this last case, how with this
Yeah.
new word would that
Right,
impact that
right,
case, right? And I
right.
think that's what we're trying to identify and what I think a valuable use of our time to have that conversation. But I think too, as long as I think it wouldn't necessarily impact, but it could impact the report of that officer to articulate why he deployed the PSD. Because it's a misdemeanor and could be an ongoing risk with a threat of violence, right? As long as that's articulated. Yeah. Executive Director McDermott, is there anything you'd want to add to that train of thought?
Well, just a little bit of a correction. The case, I believe that you guys reviewed, that actually would be a lower level felony, so that didn't apply. But anyway, I think to what you're discussing here, the idea, exactly what Member Budnaro and Member Calderon mentioned, is we don't want to send a dog after somebody who stole a bag of chips and get a bite and all of that. But if you have, I think you all agree, and I think the agency feels the same way, that second condition of when there's a risk, there's a threat, there's violence, those are the types of misdemeanors that would warrant potentially utilizing a PSD to apprehend the individual or find them or search them or whatever. So I think the condition to me makes sense as well. We'll see about APD, but it at least gives some guidance, because when you leave it as the policy strictly says now, it says supervisor, and then it also says totality of circumstances. And you would hope, and I'm sure 99% of the time, the supervisor and the totality of circumstances will make sense. But as, to people and everything else, but as we see in our cases, common sense is not always common, and therefore there's going to be errors that are made, and totality has to be well articulated. So I think if there's some at least specificity and some parameter, I think that helps guide it. So.
Yeah, I'm in agreement there. And then let's go to the and I maybe want to go back to Vice Chair Calderon or policy analyst Mr. Raymer to talk about the second two bullet points is the remove of the specific direction and then take out the word suspect. So if we are saying we want to go with the second bullet point, adding misdemeanor crime involving risk, threat of violence, or credible ongoing risk within the totality of circumstances, how would we want Mr. Reamer to present this entire thing with those recommendations, right? And that's where I'm trying to get to, is like, how would it read?
I don't think it was all of,
Oh,
if I'm wrong, I think it was like, these are choices.
Oh, yeah, sorry, yeah. Just a list of options.
Yeah, it's options.
We could
So-
take them all or just one, or none.
So I think the second bullet point would be the only recommendation to put through for this, not all the others.
Got it. Okay, that adds clarity to what I was thinking. I thought it was, hey, we're going through 1 and 2, and then bullet points 3 and 4 were separate.
Sorry
Nope.
about
No, then I think we should make the recommendation that we include misdemeanor crime involving violence, threat of violence, or credible ongoing risk into that, while giving that, as Executive Director McDermott said, parameters to totality of circumstances, just so it is clearly defined and outlined within as clearly as possible. Does that make sense, everyone? Good. Cool. So then okay, hold on, now I gotta make the policy. Then I make a policy recommendation for SOP 1-64, formerly 4-12, and 6-9, the K-9 unit, that we direct the CPOA to, on our behalf, submit the recommendation to add misdemeanor crime involving violence, threat of violence, or a credible ongoing risk to the policy under 1-64-5-B-2-F-V. May I get a second?
Second.
Thank you, Member Budnara. Ms. Barella, can I get a roll call vote, please?
Chair Bolianitz,
Approved.
Member Budenara,
Approved.
Vice Chair Calderon,
Approved.
Member Weimer.
Approved.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That motion passed unanimously.
Thank you, Ms. Barella. That was all the policy recommendations, so now we are moving on to no recommendations. So for the record, I will read out all the all the policies that we have no recommendations on. First is SOP 1-2, social media. SOP 1-22, automated license plate reader program. SOP 1-60, integrated task force operations. Interagency, this is why you should read this stuff. Interagency task force operations. SOP 1-71, operations review section. SOP 2-11, use of tire deflation device. SOP 2-16, reports. SOP 2-22, formerly 2-34, juvenile delinquency. SOP 2-101, department vehicle grappler device. SOP 2-109, investigation service division ISD tracker program. All right, and then the next order of business in that section is APD response to policy recommendations.
Yes, we have 3 to consider. 2 of them come from 283, and then one we'll get to later comes from 286. So to start off with 283, hospital procedures and rules, submitted 2 recommendations for this one. I start with a little bit of context for this recommendation. This recommendation was made and a response was received. However, the response, as we discussed in the subcommittee, we felt was simply just misunderstanding the intent of both of the recommendations the board put forward. In the first instance, and I'll just focus on this one for now, so I'm not jumping back and forth. When it came to this recommendation, it was first responded with having a same-sex supervision or escort to the restroom simply isn't feasible in the guard duty context. But if you read the recommendation, there was no request for that. Was not in our rationale or in our recommendation. So I sent him an email emphasizing that this, really the purpose of this recommendation that we put forward and the sample language that we use is to add language guiding officer conduct when in custody individual uses the restroom in a hospital or medical facility. Without a specific directive in this area, officers have no expectations to follow, and CPOA investigators do not have a particular SOP provision to reference when reviewing complaints arising from the situations. And this, in fact, originally, if we recall, this recommendation came or was motivated by a complaint of a complainant complaining that they felt uncomfortable with an officer watching them use the restroom in a hospital. So when I wrote back to, after the clarification, I received another response from the APD author, which is attached below. And as well written as it is, I think, again, it suffers from the issue of focusing a little too much on the language we put forward as sample language. So if unless anybody has any objections to it, I'd be happy to clarify, interrupt me if you think it's the case, but I could just fast forward to the last 2 paragraphs of his response. After the numbering, where it starts and it says it additionally, APD goes on to say that departments instruct officers to maintain professionalism, avert gaze when feasible, and only observe what is reasonably necessary to ensure safety. That's basically what we were putting forward or trying to put forward to be put in policy. Sorry for the digression. He goes on to say, the purpose is not to invade privacy, but to fulfill non-discretionary legal duty. For these reasons, while officers make effort to preserve the dignity of the individual, the need to maintain visual observation regardless of clothing status is a lawful, necessary, and reasonable safety measure that outweighs any expectation of privacy for an in-custody individual in a hospital environment. The current wording in the SOP, when feasible, sworn personnel shall maintain the line of sight supervision of the in-custody individual, is intentional in its broadness. So at the end there, I actually think we get why the recommendation is being disagreed with, even if much of the context before it doesn't really align with what we were putting forward, because it's, of course, it's not that when the CPOA put this recommendation forward and when the board put it forward that we're not concerned with people's privacy. We are, but that wasn't the purpose of this recommendation. Again, it was to have some kind of policy language such that officers know how to behave in that situation so they can feel comfortable going about the conduct of supervising someone using the restroom, and so that investigators have something to fall back on, or not to fall back on, but to actually review against when complaints arise. However, I did speak to the CPOA investigator who put forward this recommendation originally, and they said that the CPO investigators can still rely on the line of sight supervision of the in-custody individual language from this policy and the general professionalism standards in SOP 101 reviewing complaints in this context. So it's not that the CPOA has no way to investigate these kind of things. But this recommendation was intended to benefit APD by reducing the subjectivity involved in determining whether an officer conduct was, in fact, professional. So instead of having specific language defining exactly how an officer may behave in that situation, such that it would be easy to determine whether they violated it or didn't, it comes more to a subjective standard of that person's or that investigator's opinion of their professionalism in this situation. So this may lead to, as the investigator hinted at, like this may just cause more investigations into this, or maybe perhaps even more sustains in this, even though this is a rare complaint. So the investigator, I say that all just to say that the investigator doesn't feel as if this is something that needs to be prioritized because there is means to address it otherwise. However, there is a disappointment that there seems to still be a lasting misunderstanding that I was unable to cure with what I thought was explicit language about the purpose of this recommendation. So that's where we, sorry for long wordy there, and I even cut some of it out, so apologize.
Executive Director McKay.
I don't really have much to add about that. I mean, a lot of times in these, and this is more of a broad statement, a lot of times in these recommendations, we are attempting to aid APD by giving guidance so that officers can avoid pitfalls that may have, come out because of complaints or things that we see as opportunities. Sometimes it seems that that's not always acknowledged that that's the place we're coming from with this. Again, it does appear that there's a bit of a misunderstanding by the policy owner as to what the intent is. But to the point of Mr. Reamer's statement, I mean, we'll continue doing the investigations. We'll continue to address them as we need to. This was just instead of it leaving it up to a new officer who's like, oh, I don't know how to handle this, here's some guidance so that you know how to handle this. But if the department doesn't want it to be that specific, then we will just continue to move on. And then as complaints, and we've seen this in the past, as more things happen or as more cases happen or as more sustains happen or whatever, then all of a sudden the light bulb goes off and says, oh, okay, now we'll change this. So enough complaints haven't happened yet for it to quite kick in. So that's really all I can say with that kind of a thing is we try and rectify it, but if we're too soon or too early on that scale, then we'll just keep moving on.
And so to my initial thought behind this is it seems like there's a misunderstanding. I don't think we forward this off to the chief or anything like that. It's on the priority level of, not much right now. If we can get more data from investigations and findings and stuff like that, at that point we're like, this is what we're getting, this is what our investigators are finding, and they're being sustained or whatever, right? At that point, once we have more data, we're able to be like, here you go, and do what you please with it. To the point, we're trying our best and to alert them to certain stuff and mitigate as much as we can. But if this is where we're going to stand now, I think we leave it as such, and we will revisit again down the road.
I agree. I agree on both fronts. The only question I have for Mr. Reamer is, did you ever reach out to over the phone to talk to this policy owner, or was it only emails?
No, it's just email.
Okay, no, that's fine. Yeah, because I think some of it too, and not that you should do what I just was curious because that's what it seemed like, it was email only. So that's my. But yeah,
actually, your point's well taken, and I did consider. Unfortunately, this, I mean, most people's phone numbers are attached to their emails in Outlook. You can just pull them up. Unfortunately, for this author, that's not the case. I still could have reached out to another APD and found his number, but I would have called him if it would have been linked. But wasn't.
No, I just was like, did a phone call to go, hey, we seem to just be miscommunicating and missing that clear encoding, decoding process of communication. But yeah, I agree of, yeah, we're not going to raise this to the chief. We're just going to let it go as is. And I hope we don't get more complaints about this. And that includes sustained complaints. But until we do, okay. Does that make sense, Camila? Hmm? Okay. Do we have to take a vote on it? No, because it's just information. Cool. Awesome. All right, let's move to the second one.
Yes, so this one's a little bit more of a technical recommendation, and I think kind of slightly different. I can just read this one in full. So we originally requested that add a new subsection to 283.4D hospital guard duty assignments. Recommend a system or a process to make the name of the in-custody individual searchable in the CAD system, allowing their location and who has them to be easier to discover. The CPOA, CPOAB defers to whichever system or practice works best for APD to establish a searchable chain of custody for individuals under guard duty. But we did, after speaking with some CPOA investigators, put forward a sample, something that we thought could work, which is by adding a new subdirective. Whoever is responsible for guard duty shall add the name of the in-custody individual as the subject and person details of the CAD. We thought that would be a way where you could just type in that name into the CAD system, and then you could pull up relevant details. It's easier than searching through individual CADs and reading through the notes of them to find names, or even much better than watching OBRD to try to figure something out. But APD response did not concur. In response to tracking of the prisoners, APD said, in response to the tracking of prisoners who are transported to the hospital, this is already an administrative duty that is coordinated between department, hospital guard coordinator, and dispatch supervisors. While the official arrest report may not include specific information about the transport to a hospital, the specific information for guard duty assignments that have been created are sent to every dispatch supervisor in an email by the hospital guard duty coordinator. This email contains the following information. The date and time of PTC will be fully covering or assisting with coverage on a guard duty assignment. 2, prisoner information to include name, date of birth, charges. 3, injuries requiring the prisoner to be hospitalized. 4, hospital location to include which specific hospital and room number. Again, I spoke to the investigator that originally brought this recommendation forward, or consideration for a policy adjustment, and I should maybe circle back and just describe the situation that was taking place in this that led to this recommendation. So we received a complaint from a complainant that said about a family member, or a family member. They knew that they had been arrested, so they had called APD to try to find their status and location. And APD, by looking, I believe it was discovered in the case that by looking through the incident report, saw that the individual had been booked at MDC. That turned out that was inaccurate information. So that was told to the complainant. The complainant then called MDC, where MDC told them that the person had never been booked. So this led to actually a few days of this complainant not knowing where this family member was, until they eventually submitted a CPOA complaint, in which the investigator kind of tracked down. It apparently took hours looking through the CAD and OBRD footage to actually see that the report was just incorrect, and that he was actually taken to a hospital. So this is what led to that recommendation, be it that the investigator couldn't efficiently find out and track the chain of custody or the status of this individual. So it made us feel like APD may not have the means to do that either. But as we see, they do have this email system. And when I talked to the investigator, they said the situation that led to this recommendation included an inaccurate information and incident report. This is not what the complainant was concerned with in this context, but in future situations, the CPOA may need to investigate the officer's reporting rather than viewing it as a potential dispatch communication issue, which is not something we generally take on, even when that is not the alleged issue in the complaint. This recommendation was made to benefit APD, again, by providing a more effective means of tracking and retrieving an in-custody individual's location, reducing the potential for APD to share inaccurate information, and limiting investigations that may result in officers being held accountable for inaccurate or untimely reporting. So to kind of simplify that, at least, basically what the investigator was saying is, in context of this response, if this case were to come up again and they were to look into it again, the officer themselves would have been found for a violation of inaccurate reporting. But since the investigator was able to discover where the person was and told the complainant, and that was confirmed, that the complaint itself became kind of moot. So there was actually no sustained finding in this case. But again, like the executive director referred to earlier, if APD isn't, for any reason, isn't willing to take in a policy recommendation, sometimes the best way is just to enforce the policy in the way they have it written, such that they are either motivated to change it themselves or they're comfortable with the disciplines that result from it. So.
Executive Director McDermott.
Yeah, pretty much, again, this is meant to try and streamline their processes. You know, individuals should obviously be able to know where their folks are. There should be at least, not the details, like, you know, I think, again, one of the early responses we received on this was a miscommunication of, I believe, the policy owner thinking that we wanted family members to be told exactly like what hospital or whatever, and it's like, no, absolutely not. We just want to make sure that if they call APD, they say, oh yeah, they're at a medical facility, or oh, they are at jail, or they were released. That's pretty much all that was the information looking for. So, and because that was the problem with this case. They were given inaccurate information, and, you know, through a lot of, again, it did take quite a bit for our investigator to figure it out. And obviously, whoever they spoke to at APD didn't either have the access or have the time to do that. So it's, again, to try and help APD, but it is a minor, I think. I don't know how often. I mean, we got one complaint on it, but maybe a lot of people call, I don't know. But it's something to help, but if they're not seeing it as an issue yet, then we just keep going with it until it does become either a more pressing issue or, like Policy Reamer said, yeah, if we have to sustain for something to get them to change it, that's what we wind up doing. So.
Yeah, my whole purpose behind this was it's 2025, 2026. We pay a pretty damn penny for our reporting system that APD uses. It collects a lot of information. It can collect a hell of a lot of information. And for them to use email to track these people is rudimentary as hell. And I'm like, why? We have a whole CAD system that we pay for. So I was more heated by that than anything else because we have the mechanisms to use, but we refer back to email chain, where it can be lost, supervisors, all different stuff. May not have access to it, all these people, different stuff, right? To McDermott, Executive Director McDermott's point, is we don't want the information to be out to the public, but APD should be able to track people as soon as they're in their custody to the very end of it, to be able to track where they're at and know where they're at constantly. If we happen to not know that, that's a big issue, right? Those people are...
If I may jump in, because I don't want to forget to mention it as well. In PPRB, there was a person from ECC there who actually raised this concern themselves. So from dispatch, has the same issue. If that, now while they brought it up in PPRB and it didn't result in any policy changes, just much like our recommendation did not, that may be an avenue of communication for me to try to open that line and because that's someone within APD already that is also pushing for a change in this regard. Whether they have the same idea about how to potentially fix it, I don't know, but that could be one consideration I could reach out to because I already know that there's some pushback on this already internally within APD. So,
yep, I generally am agreeing with you all on this one. I am for the consequences of inaccurate reporting and probably looking into that and possibly getting some more complaints and all that other stuff. And then I'm also thinking about, and this is just me in data world, so just go with me on this, is if you are sending emails that includes someone's PII and you get in trouble when it gets hacked or released, that is a lawsuit. From, like, instead of just a complaint, that is a lawsuit to the city because you're including PII in an unsecured email. Just saying, make that with what you will. That is a factual thing that people, there are lawsuits going like crazy for that. So if we're not using a system we're paying a lot of money for, that is secured with SOC 3 reporting and all that other compliance stuff, and we're going to email, okay. Did anybody else have a thought on that one? Okay. Mr. Reamer, let's go to the next one.
Let's do it. So, moving on to 286. So, auto theft and motor vehicle theft related investigations. So, this is a reoccurring recommendation for us. We have add a new subsection to 286-4D, recovering stolen license plates, as number 3. And this is all for the purpose of PSAs taking license plates off vehicles, raises concerns about PSA safety. So in order to try to limit that or prevent it entirely, the recommendation is 3, police service aides, PSAs, shall not recover a license plate that has been reported stolen. PSAs shall immediately notify or request sworn department personnel to respond and take appropriate action. This isn't sample language. We're saying this should be put into policy. Now the APD response, as well written as it is, and really, I think can kind of focus on, is actually kind of also again made perhaps moot by the next bullet point, which is people have been referring to this. There was some idea that the department had already acknowledged that they were going to try to cure this issue, and we were able to discover where that idea came from in non-concurrence memos. CPC 6625, which is in September, and 6225, which is August. APD stated that the practice of PSAs removing license plates is being corrected departmentally. So I reached out for an update on this comment, and APD stated they are working with city legal to get a correction drafted with the appropriate language, and it'll be sent out soon. The deputy chiefs are aware of the issue and are working with the chief and staff on it. As soon as something is drafted, we will be provided a copy, that is great news, and is if we have to just keep chiseling away at this one until progress is made, we will do that. So I will stay on top of that, and it may not end up being this policy, 286, where it comes out. It may be the PSA policy, right? And that's because, as you can see in the last line of the APD response to the recommendation, where it says, since the PSA SOP already provides clear instructions for handling elements of criminal activity and disorderly conduct in these scenarios, any concern regarding the scope of PSA duties, including the removal of stolen license plates, should be formally addressed and adjudicated within the PSA SOP rather than the auto theft SOP. So that's why that was the main reason I believe it was denied, among others, according to that author, in 286. But it does look like something is in the works for this to be changed, whether it's in this policy or another. So.
Thank you, Mr. Reamer. Deputy Director, do you have anything you'd like to add? Huh? I said it once. I'm going to start saying that, right?
PSA issues, of course, are definitely an agency concern. There's a lot of different things that PSAs are utilized for that are great, but then there's some things that are of concern. And during the policy subcommittee, there were some definite safety concerns that were raised and discussed about PSAs being engaged in this specific activity. And that's our motivation, is mostly to, protect PSAs from potential harm, since we hear a lot about how stolen vehicles and that those people that are in stolen vehicles are very dangerous, and now you're asking a PSA to go to a potentially stolen vehicle and start messing around with it. I mean, these things can have bad consequences. So that was one of the main concerns, obviously, for this, as well as, do they actually have the authority to seize that property? That's another debate. Sworn officers are given that, PSAs are not sworn. So there's a lot of different issues with PSA activity. So this is one of those things. The department has Mr. Remuter already said, apparently recognize it as an issue and are supposedly going to rectify it. When and where exactly, I guess remains to be seen, but at least it's on the radar. So, and we will just keep, again, as cases come up, keep working with it, keep identifying the things, providing more examples of what's going on until that's rectified, so.
I concur with that. Simple as that.
Yep, I mean, let's keep an eye on it. At least it seems like they're aware, which is all that, you know, and then I think, you know, just in this, all the different ones is we're trying to do and trying to give guidance, and that's what we're here for. So any other questions, comments about the APD responses to policy recommendations? No? All right, let's move on to the next order of business, which is other business. Anything that we want, anything that the board members want to know? Nope. Then let's move on to adjournment. The next regularly scheduled board meeting will be held on Thursday, January 8th, 2026 in the new year in these chambers. So with that, at 5 p.m., sorry, it doesn't say 5 p.m. on here. At 5 p.m. So with that, I make a motion for adjournment. May I get a second?
I second that motion.
Thank you, Vice Chair Calderon. Ms. Barilla, can I get a roll call vote, please?
Chair Bolianis,
Approved.
Member Budenara,
Approved.
Vice Chair Calderon,
Approve.
Member Weimer.
Approved.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That motion passed unanimously.
Thank you, Ms. Barilla.
You're welcome.
Thank you all for attending tonight. Happy holidays, and see you guys in 2026. Have a great evening.
Unplug that phone.
Bye-bye.